Time's the charm.
Yeah, indeed. I'm never going to live that down.
Nope.
I'm not going to live it down because it affected me so much. That's the problem. So if I just went, yeah, I don't care.
It affected us too. It affected us too.
If I just say, yeah, I don't care, no one's ever going to remind me of it. But if I sit there and panic, like, hey, you remember that time you messed up? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, right.
How you doing?
I know you guys are all introduced already, so I will just put myself on mute, and I'm here if you need me.
No worries.
Sure. So how's it going?
Oh, yeah.
It's going. It's going. Been really busy.
Yeah.
And been playing the stuff and things that you're about to talk about.
Yeah, I was joking with Dan and Finn. I was like, I'm pretty sure Xynode's gonna know more of the details of this stuff than we do.
Yeah, right.
There's a couple of details missing. It depends where you want to go with it, but I don't know all the bosses yet. Although I'm close.
There's 60 plus bosses. So.
I'm close.
We're only gonna play Arc 1.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess we'll still do kind of our standard thing here to at least provide some of the insight on,
of course,
what we were trying to do. So yeah, I mean, it's update 40. Big update, as you know. Typically, in previous years we would do a zone DLC in Q4, and this is definitely different for a number of reasons. It's endless archive, it's some quality of life stuff, it's all base game, which was a pretty big departure for us. So like everyone get benefit from this stuff. There are benefits in endless archive if you are an ESO Plus subscriber, but it's not required. So yeah, we definitely hope that we wanted something that everyone, all the players could jump into and chew on. Endless Archive, of course, is the centerpiece of this, which we'll be spending most of our time talking about, but there are some other things that we decided to do. I'm sure you're aware of these things, but I'll still run through it a little bit. Group Finder, obviously, big one. We had Battleground and Dungeon automated matchmaking for a long time, but we wanted to provide a tool that makes it easier for players to find other players for any kind of activity in the game. And it's not an automated matchmaking system, but it is a tool that makes it much easier. So players can publish and advertise their groups for whatever activity they want and use all kinds of filters and such, and players can search to see what groups are out there and also use their own filters for the types of activities and such they're looking for. There's a ton of those filters. We also have a couple of new things like the invite code, where people can sort of password protect their groups. The ability to choose whether or not a group leader the group leader can choose to auto accept or not the requests coming in. So obviously for something like, people are going to be doing Dark Anchor runs, we imagine people would probably use the auto accept option, right? But
sure.
For something like, hey, we're doing this like difficult trial or something, it might be a little more manual. Like, no, we actually want to see who's asking to jump in.
Be a bit more selective.
Yeah. And then of course we have all the categories, and we included Endless Archive in there because it is a 1 or 2 player activity. But there's also the custom category for anything that's not captured, right? So we're gonna do a role-playing event or something like that, right? They can still use this tool for whatever type of activity, multiplayer activity, that they want. We think that this will be particularly valuable to people wanting to do trials. Our running joke here is Craglorn chat's going to get a lot more quiet after this tool goes live. But also Cyrodiil, which was actually one of the original inspirations for this, was like, hey, in Cyrodiil we want to make it easier for people to find groups once they hop into the campaign. So,
sure.
But then as we talked about it, we were like, actually, this would be great to have this for the entire game. So we spent a little more time working out all those details and making it a much broader feature for everybody. Other things, Grandmaster crafting stations. I'm sure you're familiar with this. Like, there's 77 crafted sets in the game. You can multiply that by 4 for the different durable types. this just makes it way easier for it. Both makes it easier for people to sort of easily craft the sets they want to, especially in like their guild crafting hall or whatever. It also saves furnishing space, right? So that people can actually spend more of their furnishing limit decorating instead of rows and rows of hundreds of crafting stations. So, yeah. So we think that definitely the crafters and the guild folks are gonna, and the housing folks are gonna appreciate this.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And then some other things we've added. Oh, speaking of crafting, actually, jewelry crafting. Rebalanced the jewelry crafting economy. We know, we introduced it in 2018. We know it was intentionally designed to be more of an aspirational, veteran player feature when we built it. That was intentional. But over time, we're constantly monitoring the economy. We read the forums, we read the feedback. We know that people have expressed there's been a lot of pain associated with upgrading your jewelry. So we went ahead and said, okay, let's make this more accessible to a larger segment of the community. And so the materials, of course, are going to be considerably easier to get now. It'll be much easier to upgrade your jewelry. We've also gone through and updated the master writs. This won't affect the old ones, but it will affect the new ones, so if you have existing writs, you'll not benefit from having a bunch of writs already in your bank, incomplete writs. But yeah, the new writs will actually be much more reasonable in terms of, hey, it's actually worth investing my time and resources in this to get those writ vouchers. So, yep. And then, even though we don't have a new zone typically with antiquities, we've only introduced new antiquities with new zones. There is no new zone this time, but we're still introducing new antiquities. A lot of those leads, I believe most of them are actually found in the Endless Archive, either by finding them in chests or by purchasing them with the fortunes that we'll talk about a little bit later. Same thing with Tales of Tribute. New deck, Hermaeus Mora deck. It introduces a new mechanic. It's kind of an interesting risk-reward mechanic where you're like actually helping your opponent at the same time you're helping yourself, and a lot of those deck fragments and such are also earned in Endless Archive. We've gone through and standardized some rewards, especially quest XP across the entire game. We wanted to make sure that players were appropriately being rewarded with XP whenever they're questing, since questing is one of the most popular activities in the game. And then finally, class sets. We can talk a little bit about when we look at them here. But yeah, first time introducing class sets. It's something we've been noodling on for a long time, but we decided to pull the trigger with Endless Archive. And I guess, yeah, we'll talk more about those later. But yeah, that's most of the major beats for our sort of quality of life and new features. But Endless Archive really is the main course here. So you and Finn can go ahead and run through, and Finn can talk about what the team was thinking about on here.
What were we thinking?
I have a question first of all.
What's that?
And this is a broad question, but maybe you can answer it because it piques my interest. How long since the word go have you been working on this?
So
That's weird. Yeah.
So early last year, I think, is when I started to write designs for it.
I remember seeing stuff up on the whiteboard when Finn was like, this is just like an idea. It wasn't committed to or anything.
Right.
Gotcha.
So it's been, kind of in these rough ideas phases stuff. But then everything got finalized kind of late last year about what we were actually going to do, and then budgeting time and stuff like that. So I would say about a year off and on.
Quick.
Yeah, once it all kind of gets finalized, and then the team, the thing with this was there's so much in here that we didn't know how to do. It's never been done before in the game. So that was the biggest, I think, hurdle that we had as a team, was to say, okay, we know how to build bosses, we know how to build linear space, we know how to do all that stuff, and here's all the other things we don't know how to do. Now, we knew how to do stages and transitioning and stuff because we've done arenas, but how do we make this perpetually, endlessly escalate? and what does that look like, and how many bosses can we actually curate in here to say, okay, we're going to use these. So there's a lot of unknowns that we had to work through, so we gave ourselves a bit more time than we typically would for a 2 dungeon pack, which is about the time we had allocated for this.
Gotcha.
Which is, the typical time it would take us to do a complete 2 dungeon pack. We allocated towards this. So. Cool. So we are in the index. This is the starter area, as you know. This is where you will come to. It's kind of like your hub. There's some merchants over here. We're going to go over a little bit later. This guy right here is Master Malkest. He gives you the rundown of what's happening here. This is basically a library to Apocrypha, part of Hermaeus Mora's Grand Library, and it's in chaos. So he's telling you that there's a powerful Daedra called Thoet Replicanum, and she's causing havoc in here, and we got to stop her. The good part is you could do his quest, and really the first arc, which is what we're going to do today, is designed for players that not end game players, put it that way. It's designed for players that are used to kind of playing the game, have a little bit of skill, and then they can go through and ideally what it is people will come in here, complete their first arc, and then come in here daily, because that daily quest targets that, and they'll slowly build up their archival fortunes and their item sets and all the other things that are in here. And then for the more hardcore players, people that are leaderboard oriented or just want to, have fun with a friend, they'll come in here and they'll try to push a bit deeper.
Okay.
We will come back here after the first arc, but let's go ahead and jump in. There are going to be some changes. Now I don't have to worry about difficulty here because you're going to carry me through this. But I will talk about some of the changes that aren't present yet.
Oh, good.
That will be on PTS. So, for instance, we are going to go through 3 stages. The way it works is there's stages, cycles, and arcs. We are going to go through 3 stages, and then you fight a cycle boss. But when next PTS and then going forward, we're reducing a stage per cycle.
Okay.
So there's only going to be 2 stages and then a boss.
What was the thinking behind that?
A lot of that has to do with feedback we've been getting from players and just generally taking a look at the pacing that we've seen as players go through here. Spend a whole lot of time in the stages, which isn't technically necessarily a problem, but the lack of feeling of getting rewarded for doing those stages, it kind of contributed to that. People are really getting to the boss phases, and those are the ones that people have more fun with. So we wanted to take some of that edge off and some of that grindy feeling in between there. So you're going to get 2 stages and then a cycle boss. And it's funny because in internal testing, I know Rob can talk to this too because the gameplay integration team did a lot of internal testing too. They, after playing through it, they're like, oh wow, that feels much more snappy and much more like a better just kind of experience. It felt like it dragged a little bit on when you had that extra stage in there, and this feels much snappier, and each stage, including the boss stage, feels like it has a purpose. You know what I mean? Like,
so that's
you build
3
up
stages, including the boss.
It'll be 3 stages, including the boss. Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
And each one feels like it has a purpose. Those 2 middle stages before, where you had a stage 2 and stage 3, they felt like they kind of dragged on, and they didn't. Like the stage 2 part didn't really feel like it had a purpose. Like the first stage now, as you come into it, you don't have a verse, so you're coming in here and you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to challenge this. Then you get a verse for the second stage, and then you're building up to get that verse for the third stage for your boss. Just kind of all generally flows better.
Okay.
I'm going to grab Flame Aura.
Nice.
Verses, as you know what verses are. When we get a Portal to the Unknown, we'll go ahead and take it. You generally know what verses are, but those are for those that don't know. They're short-term buffs that last for the entirety of the next stage, but they do not persist. So you want to use them based on the what you have coming up, and knowing where you are in the cycle is kind of important there. I love the Arcanist, just saying.
You
So
don't
good.
love the Arcanist. You love
Oh,
just pressing
absolutely.
one button.
Two. There's 2 buttons, sir. There are
Okay,
2
two.
buttons.
Well,
2
I've got a
buttons.
taunt now, so we're good.
Okay, good.
I got the
yeah.
eyeball.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That is such a cool verse.
Yeah. One thing about the verses were just coming up with those was really cool because oftentimes we, even when we have discussions with gameplay about what they want to do for item sets or whatever, we have to make sure that we hedge toward really caring about balance and everything like that. So the verses were an opportunity for us to say, what if we just added some really cool stuff that wasn't necessarily, I still have this quest too. So.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I actually just completed it. So if we see her again, then
Yeah, I've got a new one.
yeah. Actually being able to kind of put in here and say, all right, let's find out some really, really cool stuff that we can give players that is really, really impactful. I think that's where the avatars came out, and those were really, really cool once you build up to those.
Yeah, of course. I've seen one of, well, I've seen all of them, but I've used one so far. I've used what we call Juffy, the werewolf.
Oh yeah, the werewolf. Yeah.
Yeah, I've used that. That was insane because one round.
It is, right?
Yeah, one round I got it for no reason, and I was nothing really to do apart from kill a few ads. And then another round, I went up against the Ash Titan.
Yeah.
So I got the verse, jumped in, turned into a werewolf, and it was the first time I'd seen him. And there was no hope of me looking at any mechanics because they just obliterated him.
Yeah,
But,
that's what I said. Is like the avatars are
random.
super, super powerful, and that's kind of what we were hoping for. Is that people will, people will choose these and build that. So like as you get, and that's kind of the idea behind the visions at all. Anyways, is these are the moment to moment in or the run type progression where you're presented with things you're going to make the best opportunity you can out of what you're presented,
of course.
and it lends to each run being different. Because even you just say, oh, I had that once and it was really, really fun and impactful. Yeah, those are the things that we want. We want you to kind of remember, oh yeah, that was cool when I did this, and have those little moments that you get.
Yeah, I agree. To be fair, that is something that I did actually appreciate because, not to point out any of the base stats as to how they are or how they shouldn't be, but when it comes to crits in the game versus some other places, it feels like if you build for it, you basically just expect it. If you build for health, magic, stamina, you've got it, you just kind of expect it because that's how you build. Whereas this, you don't have the same thing every single time and you don't take it for granted. And it completely changes every single run. Like I've run this, well, you can track anyway because you've got the buttons, but I've run this enough. And no, I haven't. I'm going to run the hell out of it when it goes live. But I've run it a lot on PTS, and every single time it has been completely different. And sometimes it's like, oh, these verses didn't land when I wanted them. Then another time, you've got just everything on your side, and it's so different.
Yeah. And that's crazy. Generally what we want to do. And also, there's ways to mitigate that. You can spend your fortunes on the random verses. That come up if you're, I think Rob had that last time we were running through and me and him were playing and showing it off, and it's just every verse he got was just not geared towards his character. But you get the opportunity to kind of like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to use, this random verse to give me like that slight edge because these verses aren't really doing much, and it could turn around pretty much.
Yeah, of course.
Then all of a sudden you get this stack of verses and you're like, oh, this was...
We had it the other night where we were getting really rubbish verses for our setups, and I had something which was assault skill increase.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what? I've got nothing else I can use, so I'm going to put on proxy that. And it was brilliant. It actually worked.
Yeah.
110% extra damage.
That's also a good thing too, is to say, you may get verses that augment something that you don't necessarily have yet, but you were like, all right, well...
make it work.
Atarashi.
He's fine. Oh, you made him.
That was a lot of fun, I think, as we went through, and for the designer who was kind of doing this, to go through and take a look at bosses and how to, not just what bosses would be cool in here, but also how to fit them into this space so they work with these encounters and stuff. And it was and geared towards 2 people. So
I'm
that
hoping
was a
we
lot of
see
fun.
some of those, but if we don't, I'm just gonna say it anyway. The boss fights, the trial fights specifically,
Yeah.
fighting them in a different space with a different amount of people was very refreshing, to say the least.
Yeah.
Especially when it came to like the Serpent and Rakat.
Yeah.
They were cool
And
as hell.
Zagasa in particular is
Yeah.
it's a beast.
YOLO
What's
was a
also
cool
funny
fight.
is we curated these bosses and then we separated them out into tiers
Okay.
so that for a couple reasons. One, because we didn't want to overwhelm players early, but also to give a structure to it, since you're not seeing the same bosses or potentially seeing the same bosses, every time you go through here.
Of course.
So that tier 1, like cycle 1 is going to be tier 1 bosses, cycle 2 is going to be tier 2, tier 3 and tier 4 all the way to cycle 4. And the tier 4 bosses or cycle 4 bosses are always more difficult. And it was funny how it lined up, because originally you come in and you're like, oh, it's only going to be all trial bosses. But then you're like, actually, Lord Warden is really, really tough. And
yeah.
and Molag Kenna ended up being like one of the really the most difficult bosses too. So
Dude, Keen is one of the coolest fights I've seen so far.
yeah,
I did not expect that. But that's the really weird thing, right? Obviously, for newer players, they don't experience that on a regular basis, and maybe just like, hey, this is a new boss, this is quite cool. But then you've got experienced players that have seen that multiple times, and even from my perspective, and I've played ever since the beginning, as soon as I saw that boss, it's like, oh my god, it's Molokina! I was actually excited to see her.
yeah.
It was pretty cool, man.
I think that the biggest challenge I think we had was the dragons, just because they're so big.
They're massive.
But it's pretty funny because they have, inherent disadvantages to themselves. So and that's based on verses. So when you get the little verse that, or I think it's called Galing Force or something, you get the verse that your light attack shoots out 3 tornadoes.
Yep.
It murders dragons because they always get hit by everything. So
we did go against the dragon.
Portal.
Oh, we got a portal, nice. And I was very pleasantly surprised because we got halfway through the fight. Oh, we got a quest. I've already got mine, I think. We got halfway through the fight, and then we thought, do you know what? There's no way they're going to use the whole room because the whole room's quite small. And then the next thing we know, the barriers went up and the dragon's flying around the room. Like, oh, he's flying. He's doing his lake town, and it was really good. YOLO especially was a cool fight.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the lightning dragon, but he was pretty nasty.
So we have Molamir.
That's the one.
And then YOLO's in here. Woo!
But we had 2 different effects to Rakat as well, because we were on setups and verses that just were not doing too well at the time combined.
Mm-hmm.
And we went against Rakat and we had to mess around with the pads, and we were having some trouble.
Yeah.
Then we had another run which was relatively normal. We had some decent versus our setups, and it was pretty okay. And then we had another run where 2 of us had the fire orb, and 1 of us also had an extra verse from the Gale.
Oh, nice.
Rakat didn't get off the first pad.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous, and that's the difference. And it wasn't different players or different builds or anything like that. It was just literally, can you stack the right verses at the right time? And it was brilliant. It was so fun.
And that's that kind of mastery level that we hope to expect out of this, is that players come in here. Oh, I got Gilded Flight. Oh, man.
One of the
Gilded Flight is
advantages...
like one of my favorite. But we're on a boss fight, so it's not really gonna...
one of the nice sort of things that comes with, because this is very much a roguelike inspired activity, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the really nice things that happens with roguelites is that phenomenon you just described, which is essentially that a lucky run in terms of the randomized elements of it can allow a player to sort of play beyond their skill level for that moment, right?
Yes.
Like but then other times, right, like it's like additionally challenging. But like that's kind of what keeps it fresh, right, and keeps it interesting.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've explained this on stream before to try and describe how your different runs could be, and from experience as well, I've seen people that are extremely experienced go up against a boss that they know quite well, and they're struggling because they've got to obviously fight against it alone or win a duo or whatever, which you're not used to.
Or they're in higher arcs, and it does that too, right?
And then I've seen lesser experienced players like panic but have the right verses and just destroy stuff.
Right.
Like, this is absolutely brilliant because you basically flipping a coin.
Yeah. There's a little bit more to that, like deciding what to choose and when to choose it, and stuff like that is going to help. I think that also, those account unlocks become really, really powerful.
Yeah, they are really good.
I haven't really talked about it, but as you get the achievements and stuff like that, and you get the opportunity to see 3 versus,
it's a game
that's
changer.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were going for too, because we have like basically 3 different levels kind of progression in there, where we have the short duration verses that are going to last for the next stage, the long duration visions which are going to last for your entire run, and then you also have the account unlocks that are just persistent forever. So
I do really like those.
Yeah, and that's what we were kind of going for, was that layered approach that.
I also like the fact that obviously when it comes to the game in general, you have to obviously, and this is a risky word here, you have to consider balance. And for content in general, that's obviously very, very tricky to do, because you've got to consider player skill, player experience. You've got all different types of factors to consider when making this accessible to everyone. In here, while that has still been done to some extent, you've kind of gone a bit crazy with some of the buffs and bonuses, and it's okay at the same time. Like, you feel stupidly powerful sometimes, but it's not forever.
And it's because
it's kind of cool.
This kind of closed ecosystem that we have, that we could build it, and a lot of it is self-serving. Like I said, you have the achievements that help you out in your future runs. But yeah, absolutely, and that was like a big opportunity for us to say, well, oh, we have to worry about balance and stuff, and it's like, well, what if we didn't have to worry as much about balance?
I've seen people that really, really struggle on an everyday basis, and I know this is vague, but when someone sits there and says, "Oh, well, I can only get 10k DPS or whatever," I've seen those players run up, grab a fire orb, and nuke a room. Yeah, and they feel so good.
Yeah,
it's really, really fun to watch and to play.
It is. It's really fun what we've been seeing. Kind of people jump in here and do. So it's been like a lot of fun. So a lot of these stages are. We're also actually going to make some adjustments in the next PTS to vary up the kind of stages, especially you would see in the first arc.
Okay.
So that you get a bit more diversity, and your first arc don't quite look the same as they have been. Meaning, the way it was weighted, you would see a certain amount of or kinds of arenas easier in the first arcs, and we're gonna actually change that up to be, give you that kind of a much more diversity, and not like hamstring you to kind of or pigeonhole you into certain arenas.
Sure.
Guardian of Pestilence. Let's go, Rat Boy.
I'm taking tomfoolery. Dude, I had that buffed up with the account buff. 100 ultimate?
Yeah.
You double stack those things. They were insane.
Portal.
Oh, yes. This I like as well. If you get a portal before the boss, you know this anyway.
Yeah.
Because people are watching.
Oh, and we get to eat sweet rolls.
Getting 3 verses on a boss is quite fun.
Yeah, yes, it is.
So one from previous.
And that was another moment too that we said, and we had to identify pretty early on, how many verses total could we possibly get, and that determines how powerful we make them.
Yeah, of course.
And so we kind of like have clamped down on the amount that you could potentially get. So, hey, buddy, what are you doing?
How many are there in total? Or can you not say, and that's player testable?
40 plus.
Okay, that plus is what does that mean?
It means more than, but not a ton more than. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so, and the reason I'm not
50.
trying to be super cagey about it.
No,
really.
I know.
It's more along the lines of, we are still in the process of evaluating stuff, and I don't want to say a number and then that changes, right? You know what I mean, or something.
Yeah, of course.
So 40 plus, we're generally going to keep them around there, and we may, the beauty of this, and we've talked about this before. I got a lead. The beauty of this is also that we can make adjustments. You know what I mean?
Of
Like
course,
we can
yeah.
come in. Oh, Swift Gale! Yes, give me a dragon.
Hey, nice. That thing.
Swift Gale
I-
in class. The
Oh.
class augment. Oh,
She's in trouble because
It's,
I got
the
Fire
Mazda.
Orb as well. Tomfoolery.
Didn't
and
we have
Fire
this
Orb.
one yesterday, Finn?
we did.
Where's
You
the
guys
Fire
will
Orb?
have no problems.
Yeah,
with
this
this,
was.
yeah.
It's
she's
already
not gonna
dead.
last long.
Yeah.
Fire Orb. Ah, she moved. Rip. You've got so
Swift
much
Gale.
power from the Gale. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. And that's the thing, because you don't get that all the time. So you could walk into a
Right.
room where you like, oh, I wish I had that. And then
Yeah.
another time, like, well, I don't need it. It's so random sometimes. And that gives a bit of replayability as well, because you're like, oh, do you know what? This time I'm going to get all the cool buffs. You're not.
Right,
but
yeah.
Do it.
So we're coming up on the last arc. We're not changing that structure. It's still going to be 5 arc.
Okay.
And then you fight Thoat every 5th arc. And how far have you gotten into it?
Not every 5th arc. Every 5th
I've
cycle.
done
I'm
the-
sorry, 5th every 5th cycle. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
5th cycle.
You mean
Okay.
since the update or initially?
Yeah. How? What's the furthest arc you got to?
So we stopped at 7, I think.
Okay. So you saw
Um,
most of her transformations.
I saw all of them because there was what?
Yeah.
There was 5, isn't there now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen.
Yeah,
it. So
so she-
the dragon.
Yeah.
That was cool.
That was also cool too. That to see there's another kind of slight escalation. Now most of these monsters, like we add monsters, of course, we add marauders, we add fabled, which we've had a couple times in here. But then also being able to kind of augment her fight in particular and how she breaks
Yeah.
off and does shards has been
I do
was
like
another.
What you did with that
kind of
recently.
Huh?
So I do like what you did with it recently with the PTS week 3, I think.
Yeah.
Where basically instead of all the individual targets having like 3 million health each, you kind of staggered it so it was a combined amount of health over
Right.
the whole fight. That I think is still quite fun to fight as an experienced player, but I also think it gives lesser experienced players a bit of a chance rather than just kind of hitting
Right.
the same target for far too long, because that's the situation that some of them might have felt that they were in. Even though the mechanics are relatively similar, they are really cool fights though, and you have to use a lot of space.
Yeah, it's funny because I say that Thoat was really the only new monster we had in
Yeah.
here, but really even the cycle bosses, because of how much we've adjusted them for 2 players, they feel kind of different as well.
they do.
Did you come in here with a solo or with 2 people?
I've done both, but we went for a set amount of rounds as much as we could at the time.
Right.
Because it's mindful of time.
So
But also, I've had also a habit of trying to find all the bosses, so I was doing a few rounds, stop, a few
Right.
rounds, stop, a few rounds, stop,
Yeah, that
and
makes
just
sense.
rotating them.
yeah. So
I've done both
then
solo
you
and
would have
duo.
seen that there's no functional difference in health
no.
and power between solo and duo.
No, it's identical.
Yeah, and we did that because with the full expectation, we realized that duo players are going to get further. So that's kind of like baked into it. But then we do like we typically do for leaderboards. We separate out the solo and the duo leaderboards so that you're not.
I think that was a
competing.
smart move.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that were concerned about that, even about the mention of this being a leaderboard situation. They're like, well, obviously 2 players are going to get further than me. Like, no, there's one for you too. And that was kind of
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. Yep. So it looks like these are just like destroying these stages. All right. So now we got achievement unlocked, friends for life.
Yay!
Imagine me and you, and you and me. Anyways,
Run, Rob.
Sanguinate. Now we're heading to Thoat.
Let's go. I got a damage shield. We're good.
She's mean.
She is. First time I encountered her, I had no idea what to expect. I mean,
Yeah.
that should be the case, but I was
Yeah.
a little overwhelmed. That was confusing as well. She's like, oh, ice. It's not ice. It's not ice at all.
Yeah, it's crystal. What's funny is I had the another thing yesterday. I had the eyeball, the taunt, and it works on her.
It does.
It's awesome. It's so great when you get that kind of like, oh, all right, awesome.
Well, we had a tank at one point, and we got the taunt, and he was struggling because he wasn't sure of the mechanics. He was kind of hugging the walls, and then the taunt just took the boss straight off him.
Yeah.
It's like, that gives him some breathing room.
Yeah, it's really nice. All right, so this is where you get your first set piece. This is where they drop from. You can drop them here, or you can spend archival fortunes in the index, which we're going to head back to. We're going to head to the next stage real quick, and then we're going to head right back to the index.
Sure.
I'll go over some of that stuff. We're going to use this little doohickey here. It appears before every single stage. Allows you to go back to the index. I know you know this already, but I'll still go through the spiel. Actually, I'm not. Apparently, I missed the portal here. There is no time component to the leaderboard here, which is very important that we kind of like reiterate that a lot of the content we've been through, people are forced to build very specific builds because they want to move through as fast as possible and glass cannon their way through it and stuff. Maelstrom and Vatishman being the two that are mainly that. But we knew that when we came in here, even for solo players, we wanted to open it up. So and the biggest way we could do that would be remove the time component in here. Now, once you are on the duo leaderboard, you are forever on the duo leaderboard for that particular run. So if you summon a companion, bring a friend in here, you're going to be on the duo leaderboard. Doesn't matter if that person leaves. This little cool doohickey right here is the Runic Threadweaver. So if you've been in here for a long time and you got to go, take the dog out or eat dinner or whatever, and you just want to end your run, you click this. I'm actually going to do it right now because it ends our run. And you get this handy little summary screen, and it prints your score to the leaderboard. Okay. So if you don't want to wait for all of your threads to be gone, you can just end your run and say, okay, I'll just take that leaderboard score. Which is pretty nice. We'll go take a look at this vendor over here, Tezers. This cool like book bridge. So in here, I mentioned the account unlocks. They're all listed here at varying prices for archival fortunes. This makes sense. Basically, each of the side contents for the Portals to the Unknown, they have 5 layers or 5 levels of difficulty, generally. And once you've completed it 5 times, done the 5 levels of difficulty, you get the achievement. That will unlock and allow you to get these. So the longer you're in here, the more side content, more Portals to the Unknown you do, the more you're going to build up those achievements and handle them. And then be able to get the account unlocked, which are really, really impactful. The consumables, we've mentioned those before too. These are mystery verses. They are random which verse you're going to get based on the 3 categories. So you can choose wisely. The deeper you get, you're probably going to want to take more defensive than you would offensive. But unless you're a tank, then you might want to take more offensive than defensive, or even utility for one-off stuff. Category for furnishings. A lot of these are tied behind achievements as well. So you'll go through, you'll do your whatever various achievements that you have, and then it'll allow you to purchase these with fortunes. And then the miscellaneous tab. This gives you a good selection of crafting materials if you use those. But then at the bottom is where the class sets. There's 2 different boxes. The blue boxes do not respect your sticker book. They just give you a random piece. Mm-hmm. So if you get the Blood Warrior, Basalt Blood Warrior set, this is going to give you a random piece. If you already have the sword, it could still give you the sword. It's not respecting that. Whereas the curated boxes cost more, but they absolutely respect your sticker book. So using those will give you a piece that you haven't got unless you have all of them. Then it is random. And then let's head over here to this other merchant. Also, by the way, the filers are just cool. Each one of them has like kind of their own personality, and they show up, and it's random which ones are going to show up in the various stages. And then they tell you stuff. Like one of them is like really bloodthirsty, and it's like kill, kill, kill. And the other one's like, oh, well, looks like you're doing pretty good. So, Filer Ool here. This is a gold merchant. So if you're familiar with how gold merchants work, their inventory is going to change every week. So if you see something on here that you really, really like, you should go ahead and buy it while you have the opportunity. Some things to note here: the bound style pages, which are typically only available on the Dawn Merchants. But then there's some companion gear that you could purchase with Archive of Fortunes. There's fragments from public dungeons. So usually if you do public dungeons, you have to collect all the fragments. You can actually purchase them here, some of them. And then leads, which we don't typically sell, are available on here as well, which is really nice. If some of those leads that maybe people are going to want that they haven't had an opportunity to find or something, so you can kind of get those.
Gotcha.
And then the last thing, which looks very unique in here, is this reset hourglass. And this is if you want to finish a run and start a new one, you can go ahead and hit this. If you're the group leader, you can go ahead and hit this reset hourglass, and it'll ask you if you're sure. And then when you are, it gives everybody that countdown at the bottom of their screen that they're going to leave the instance, and you can leave it, and then you can just come right back in. So you don't have to like exit and do some messing around with like swapping group leaders and doing all that, swapping between normal and vet. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You can just hit this, exit, enter right back again. And then you're in here, and it's a fresh instance. One thing I didn't mention earlier, because we'd already kind of jumped in here, but this is base game update. It is located in Apocrypha, so if you have the Necrom chapter, you can navigate here manually and just kind of run to the entrance, or you can just click the icon. And if you don't have the Necrom chapter, all you have to do is go to your Orbis, click on Apocrypha, and then click that icon, and it'll teleport you right inside. So you don't have to manually navigate here if you don't have Necrom. And that is Endless Archive. You got any other questions?
Yeah, I got loads. So, do you have? I know you've said a rough figure before, but I'm going to ask because it's on video. Do you have a specific amount or close estimate on how many bosses there are?
Well, I know exactly how many bosses there are. There are 60 plus. I'm not going to give you the exact amount, but there are 60 plus.
60 plus. Okay, I think I've seen about 50. I think I've seen about 50.
Yeah. There's between 60 and 70.
Between 60 and 70. Okay.
Yes.
So there's no more than 70.
No.
I'll take that.
Not right now.
In the
Not
future.
right now. Right. That's another thing too. Is part of this is also. It's very open-ended that we could. That's why we're not trying to be, obtuse about things, right? You know what I mean? It's more like we can add, take away, move, shift, whatever we kind of need to do in order to, make the experience better and stuff. And that's we built it from the ground up to be that kind of open-ended experience.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I mean, so it obviously we need to wait and see how players actually respond to this, right, and engage with it. But it is constructed in such a way, and this is one of the advantages of this style of design, where there's a lot of like procedural elements to it, is that you can actually add stuff to it, and you don't have to add a ton of stuff at any given time in order for it to actually have a pretty significant impact, right? And that's both on the content side and the reward side. So, for example, like when it comes to rewards, we have the class item sets. There's one for each class, and each set is specific to a skill line, right? But each class has 3 skill lines, right? So, so we're very much aware of that, and we're not committing to anything at this point in terms of timelines or what we're going to do. But absolutely, we realize that at some point it's like, hey, do we go ahead and build additional class sets that are for the other skill lines, right? Like we may do that in the future.
Gotcha.
But again, even with just the content, right? Like you add new enemies, you add new bosses, things like that. Suddenly the amount of, because it's all sort of procedurally put together, you get a lot more experiences. It's like you were saying, every time you come in here, it's different, right?
Yeah.
Also on like the tool side, the verses and visions, like you add a couple new ones of those, and suddenly you get some really new, interesting combinations as well. So lots of opportunities with this, but we need to see how this is new for us, right? And it's new for ESO players, so we just need to see how people respond to it.
So I assume it's relatively future-proof in that respect, because you can, if you create a new creature right now for a new dungeon or trial or whatever, there's nothing necessarily stopping you from creating a version of it in here.
Correct.
So what you're saying is, I'm gonna think I've got all the achievements and done everything, and then a month later you're gonna add more stuff. Keep me
Well,
up at
I'm
night.
saying that it's possible. A month later is a bit extreme. I wouldn't imagine it was just like every week there's something. Like I can't imagine that's the kind of thing. Like, but definitely something that, as Rob mentioned, you know, it was something that we thought about when we were designing this. Of like, okay, this is a system that can be augmented, adjusted, and changed. So we have to build it in that way.
So was it loosely connected to the new tech that you had added? Because obviously you looked into new technology as such when it came to the Arcanist as a class. Did some of that cross over into the construction of this?
For the Arcanist with specifically.
Not necessarily specifically, but that period of time where you introduced new tech, did some of that kind of cross over to open up opportunities?
I mean, honestly, with ESO, we're constantly introducing new tech into the game. I'm not sure what you mean specifically by that, but there's every update, there's definitely new tech being added to the game. Sometimes it's smaller things, sometimes it's larger things. I don't think there was anything specifically that we did when we built Arcanist that that directly affected development of Endless Archive, unless you have, unless you're aware of anything, Finn.
More towards the, well, obviously you've introduced a lot of different buffs and bonuses is generally quite tricky as they are, but then with the Arcanist you introduced the whole double bar stuff if it was slotted, and I know these aren't necessarily on your bar, but you are introducing a lot of new effects to a character. Did that have any crossover in there? Was it easier to do now than it would have been maybe say 4 or 5 years ago?
I think that it was more along the lines of, I'll take this back a sec. So for Endless Archive, the dungeon team in particular had a lot of interfacing with teams that they don't typically engage with, and so in particular, if you're looking at the UI team, you're looking at the back-end server engineers and stuff. We don't typically have a lot of interaction with them, other than to say we need these are the icons that we're requesting and stuff like that. But whole new UI elements aren't generally something that's added to each dungeon or anything. So when we went into this, it was very much a hand-in-hand working together, identifying all of the different pieces, and then getting all the teams together and on the same page to say, okay, this is what we're trying to do, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we've identified. So we started with a bullet list of like, here's some things that we want to do that we can't do yet, and then going to those teams and saying, this is what we want to do, and this is what we can't do, and then getting their input. UI in particular had a huge amount of input into the presentation for what we were going to do in here, because we said this is what we want to do and this is how we want to show it and this is what we want to say, and then they would do the things, the cool little flourishes of like, every time a stage goes, it comes in the middle and it picks up, and then every time you get a verse or a vision, it flies up to the top right corner and stuff. So all those cool little flourishes and stuff were very much input from the other teams that we, like I said, we don't generally have input with. So we did get new tech for here. I don't know that any particular tech made this easier that had come before it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. It's a stretch from Maelstrom Arena though, isn't it? It's absolutely insane.
To add new player?
No, the whole thing is just nuts. There's just so much in there. I mean, if you're looking at it from the outside in, if you start counting up if you don't look at it as just an empty shell and you put stuff in it, I mean, you've got all the different bosses, you've got all the different achievements, all the different buffs and bonuses that could or could not happen. There's so much to take in all at once. It must have been a task and a half to even get off the ground.
I mean, like Finn said, it certainly required a lot of different teams to contribute, because a lot of times, Finn's team, I mean, they do amazing work and they're super creative, but like they know how to make dungeons. They've made dungeons for a long time, right? Like, and there's a sort of format that players expect, and that there's certain things we do that are kind of, we try to add flourishes, but we try to keep a baseline model that is adopted, right?
Familiar.
But with this, it was like a lot of that had to get thrown out, right? And that, and not just for Mike's team, but like our team that handles all the like reward structures and stuff. We had to be like, wait a minute, all our like sort of existing paradigms for reward structures don't really fit here. We have to change these things. And so that forced us to get creative again, and it's actually really fun, right? Like that's something that when you get to work on something where there's sort of new design problems that you have to solve, like people get excited about that. So the team was very much on board with this. Like you said, the UI team, the rewards team, everybody.
And then the wrinkles even between solo and duo. So the question comes up, so why is solo the same as duo here? And that is largely because of the structure that we developed here, but also to keep it for lack of better words, to keep it bug free, or to reduce the amount of potential risk. So when you start to do stuff like, okay, we want to scale this to solo or duo. Okay, what happens when somebody joins? Because the design goal for this was very much, player comes in here, they start experiencing it solo, and they get to something, they go, this is really tough. I wish I had a friend. Oh, I'm going to invite my friend in here, and that person can join. You start fluctuating health levels and power levels and all this other stuff. Not only does it run counter to that design goal of saying, I want to bring in a friend here to help me, because if we just scale it up to 2 people being here, how much is that person going to help you? But it also prevents the issues of, oh, I've come in here and now the monsters have this, and then somebody leaves and now they have this. So we wanted to kind of service those design goals for duo come in here.
I mean, that if it did have 2 different variants, that would make things incredibly tricky anyway, even from a player's perspective, because that would be the equivalent of half launching one Tamriel and leaving the other half empty. That would be a mess. But I think you've nailed it as far as target audience is concerned, because while most of the content that you have is necessarily 4 to 12 people in an instance, or then you've got overland for everybody, you've obviously understood the fact, well, you know the numbers anyway, that the vast majority of players play on their own or with 2 people.
Yeah. And it's something that, honestly, when we mentioned Maelstrom, that's a good point, because that's something that has been requested since Maelstrom. The duo arenas, and I know Rich mentioned this on stream, because he's 100% actor. When we started doing Maelstrom, we wanted 1, 2, or 4 players. Sure. And we started to develop from that perspective, and then we went to our engineering teams, and they were like, no. Because it was going to be too difficult to do all the hoops and stuff like that, so we eventually settled on what we settled on. But it's always been kind of in the back of our mind, and we've always heard that feedback from players, like, I really want to do duo. But even that, to what Rob's point was of solving new design problem spaces and stuff, that's exactly what we were trying to do there as well. It's like, okay, what does duo content look like? What does duo leaderboard content look like? What kind of playstyles? Because we didn't want to just say, okay, well, it's now Maelstrom with 2 people, where you all have to have glass cannon builds because you have to move as fast as possible.
Sure.
And stuff. So we wanted to take a look at taking a look. So we added by subtraction in that case, by saying, okay, we're going to take this time component out. What does that do? How does that open up for players to be able to kind of come in here and like, oh, I have a healer and I want to come in here. Okay, cool. You can now, and you're not going to necessarily be kicked out of groups because you don't move as fast as possible.
So the time thing has actually been quite beneficial, in my opinion, not just because of that, because some people play slower than others, or because they go through the levels slower than others, and everyone's on a level playing field, but also because you can take a break. Now, obviously, you can't stay inactive for too long because you'll get kicked out of the game, but I've found where you have to go and get a drink, or you've got a hot drink in front of you and you don't want it to get cold. If you're on a leaderboard run, you have to commit that time to it, or else, and you can't have anything in between. Right? The door goes, you can't answer it. Maelstrom and Vatran, or even in a trial or a dungeon or something, if you're trying to do a speed run, you have to commit to that. Whereas here, you can go in and you can stop per round, or take a break, or do whatever it is you've got to do IRL, and it's not a problem. It doesn't affect anything negatively. And that has been a really big plus. Even playing it on stream with other people, they're like, oh, I've got to go buy a break real quick. It's not actually a problem.
Right.
So that was that's a big game changer for pace and inclusivity at exactly the same time as far as the leaderboard's concerned. In my opinion, at least, it was actually quite a nice move.
Yeah, and generally that is the design goal that we were trying to go for. There was to open this up to more players and stuff. What I think a side effect of that is, and we're going to see it, I think, once it goes live, is we're going to have a lot more ties. Without a time component, kind of like hash out some of those particulars of I did this 2 seconds faster, so therefore my time is a little bit better. You're not going to have those. It's really just depth. So I think that we're going to get a lot of ties, but it's one of those things of like, okay, yeah, you're still going to have like a people that get pretty deep into this, and they're going to be pushing it based on depth. And if we have ties, okay, you know what I mean? That's one of those things of like, but we're going to have ties, but is that a problem?
Not really.
Probably not. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to have a tie and it's going to be first of the board, I mean, you're probably looking at people that stayed up for 27 hours anyway.
Yeah. Well, ideally, we get the balance of people who aren't quite doing that. But we'll see how it kind of shakes out. Like right now, we've made some balance changes in PTS3 that have pretty big jumps in difficulties. It's very specific arcs. That hopefully people kind of recognize, and as they get to certain depths, they'll be like, okay, this got a lot more difficult, and they'll kind of thread out at that point. But we'll see. Well, I'm interested to see how deep people can get into this thing.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else off the top of my head.
All right.
Already covered, apart from the group finder, but I don't really have any questions on it. I'm just curious to get involved in it when it goes live.
You have no question about group finder?
The only one I'm concerned about is, obviously we all know that people can pretend to be a role that they're not.
Yeah.
Can you see? I know you can tick box whether you invite someone or not. How much can you see of what they're claiming to be before they enter?
Just what you would normally see if they were grouped with you. Like,
so you're taking their word for it.
Yeah. That is still a limitation. But the difference there is, you aren't in the activity yet.
That's very true.
Right?
You haven't gone through the load.
So you can, if it's important for you to validate that, you can choose to do that before you actually queue up. If it's a queued activity, right?
That makes perfect sense.
I think it's generally going to be a bit better, and it just for some of the specifics that Rod
I mean, some stuff it will actually filter on. So for example, CP. Like, if you actually have CP, my understanding, I actually talked with Bobby, our lead UI designer, about this recently, is that if the group leader who advertises the group sets like a CP requirement, that someone who is browsing for groups, if they do not have enough CP, they won't even see that group listed.
That's handy. Yeah, I understand. So the
but as you know, with role, it's a different animal, right? Because we don't hard define role with like your actual class. It's literally just a UI setting for each player. So
but the benefit is if someone's being deliberately awkward, which is rare, but if they are, then you haven't committed to the instance and a timer and all that kind of stuff yet, and you still have time to kind of figure that out.
And not only that, you're the group leader, right? Yes. So like, it's not like a dungeon queue where everybody's thrown in and there's technically no group leader. You're actually group leader, so you can kick people, right? So you can come in there and say, hey, you know what? You're not working out. I'm going to kick you, and we're going to find somebody else. We only need one tank, whatever, and we'll list our group. You know what I mean? And with only needing one tank, something like that. So, yeah, there's options there, I guess, for players that they may not have in Dungeon Finder. So I'm really excited to see how many trials go into this. I'm totally gonna go on live when this goes live and start running some more trials. I'm tired of shouting and crackling.
I think it adds a lot more flexibility and availability to content and groups at the same time, because people
for sure,
it's not that people don't find groups, it's that people are scared to try. Like, shouting out in Craglorn is intimidating because you never know what you're going to get in return. Like, I mean, you could get a group right away, or you could get tumbleweed. You never know. But being able to access that tool from anywhere in the entire game and not having to be in Craglorn waiting for that specific time and group is going to be a bit of a game changer. It's going to be a much faster pace.
Yeah.
That's what we're hoping for. right?
Yep.
Like we know that people tend to enjoy the game more. I mean, lots of solo players who enjoy that, but we do know that we actually see that there's a lot of benefits for players when they actually interact with other players, right? And this just
100%.
makes that easier. It's the same reason why a few years back we built the guild finder, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah.
I do have a request for that, and you can take it or leave it. Can we add a
Well,
search
well-
bar in there so we can search for somebody's name? Because if we search for the guild name, if we know what it is, we can find it.
I will jot that down, and I will pass that along to the team.
Appreciate
I don't know if there is a technical reason, like any kind of limitation there. So yeah, but specifically, you were asking if you could search by name.
Yep.
Are you
if I
talking
wanna
about the
search
guild name or player name?
Guild name.
Okay.
Oh,
Guild name.
Oh.
Yep. Because
Yeah.
if I want to
Okay.
look for a particular guild and I can't find it in the filters, but I know the name, found it straight away.
Right. Okay. I will certainly reach out to the team. I wouldn't be surprised if they've talked about this already, but I will absolutely reach out to them about it.
Legendary.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
All right, we do got to get going to another
You are
thing
out of
here.
time.
Yeah. We are. Yeah, it's good to hear from you, Zino. It's been a while.
you too.
Yeah.
It has. Thank you very much
feel
indeed.
free to reach out. Like we chat time
Will
to time.
do.
So feel free to reach out. Yep.
All right,
Thank you very
I'll
much,
see ya.
guys.
Thanks,
Speak to
everyone.
you soon.
Next time I'm in
Bye-bye.
England, we'll have to
Have good weekends all. Cheers.
See ya.